It is time. It's time to stop hiding. It's time to stand up. It's time for Christians to come together, to share their testimony, to inspire hope, and to join their brothers and sisters as we answer the call. Folks, it's time to wake up the lions. And I have an absolute lion with me today. Let me introduce this gentleman. He is a husband and father of two. He's a Catholic life coach, and he's the founder of Steadfast Life LLC, which we're going to hear all about here in just a little bit. Please welcome to the show, Matthew Jandernoa. Matthew, how you doing today, brother?
Good. How are you today, Rory?
Better than I deserve, but I'm getting used to it. So got to work through that. But listen, I appreciate you coming on, and I love that you're a life coach. I love the work that you're doing, and let's just start with you, brother. Who is Matthew Jandenaw? How has God influenced your life, and what do you want to share about your testimony, man?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me today, Rory. So brief overview really quickly. So I started Steadfast Life. Um, Honestly, because I kept coming home from work on the phone, helping a buddy through something. And my wife, she said two things to me. She said, one, I love it when you come home on the phone, which, is probably funny for most guys to hear their wife saying, but she said it because she said that, Matthew, you're always just so you, so alive when you're on the phone talking to people, helping people. And the second thing she said was, is there any way that you can make money doing that? And I was like, huh, I never had thought about it before. This is just kind of something that I do. So I thought about it, looked into coaching, and then built half a website. Struggled a lot with the motivation because I was just like, who the heck wants, at the time I was, 20, 24, 25, I don't remember. And I was like, who the heck wants to listen to me? Who would pay me for that? All those kinds of self-doubt questions. And then also too, kind of asking myself, like, am I really that full of myself to think that God wants me to just, have people pay me to help them with their problems? Um, but I kept thinking about it, praying about it, and really my wife was the one who kind of pushed me in that direction. And so built half a website, struggled with the motivation to do it. But then I was praying just after my first daughter was born. I was praying with an image of Saint Joseph and thinking about their flight to Egypt. And I was thinking about how, wow, Joseph, like you had plenty of doubts. You literally, it says in scripture, right? You were planning on divorcing quietly. Um, but then, the angel of the Lord came to him and said, do not be afraid to take her into your home. And so he went from that to having a dream and then, flying to Egypt with, no house lined up, no job lined up, no community. They don't practice his religion. They don't speak his language, hundreds, thousands of miles away, whatever. And so I was just like, wow, like any doubts that you had to have been totally done away with by the time Egypt was over, because God asked you to do the seemingly impossible, and then you did it, by His grace. Um, and so as I was reflecting on that, I just heard the Lord say to me, "Flee to Egypt." And I was like, "Okay, what's that mean?" Because I was in social work, so I was like, "Are you calling me to really double down into my work? Are you? We already had plans to move from Minnesota to Pittsburgh, so I was like, "Are you calling me to move earlier?" And in the back of my mind, I was like, and there's absolutely no way you're calling me to jump full time into life coaching. Like that's insane, right? And even just on like a prudential level, that's not really, what people do, especially as a husband and a new father. Um, and so I brought it to my wife and I didn't say anything about the coaching part. So the other options. And then she said to me, well, what if he's calling you to jump full time into life coaching? And I was like, okay, we have to pray about this now. So we did. I talked it over with some friends, good friends of ours. And then, within a week, I quit my job and I was like, okay, Lord, like you're calling me to do this. And now that I know that, I just don't have the motivation to keep working this other job that I felt like my hands are tied behind my back because I couldn't bring up Jesus. I did when I could, but I couldn't do it on a consistent structural basis. Um, and then also a lot of the times I'm working with kids and the parents would say things like they struggle with anger and obedience, which they weren't wrong, but a lot of the times it was because there was a breakdown in the family. breakdown in communication, that kind of thing. And so I just had the thought of they just need somebody to kind of coach them to help them see these things and then work on, bettering themselves in that way. And so, yeah, I quit my job. And then a couple weeks later, I used to be a missionary for a Catholic ministry, and I ran into the alumni coordinator, and she asked me what I was up to, and I told her, and she said, "Oh my gosh, we have to talk." And so I was like, "Okay." And she said, in that conversation, to quote her, she said, "I think it's divinely appointed that we partner with you." And I was like, "I agree, but wow, that was quick." And so that happened, and I went to their end of the year wrap up week. And then this ministry is in a bunch of different countries, and so all the international directors happened to be there. And so another one of them came up to me and said, "Matthew, it's good to see you," because I'd also been a minister in Ireland for him. And he said, "What are you up to?" And I told him, and he said, "We need that too." So then, the following year, they flew me out to Ireland for their wrap up week. And so stuff like that just keeps happening. But what I will say is that while the Lord has provided, it's been an absolute emotional and financial roller coaster. I remember actually a year ago, so 2020, was it 2025, 2024, August, we didn't have enough money to pay for September's rent. And I was so anxious that month. My vision was permanently affected. Like I was just constantly stressed because I just saw the numbers and I saw how many clients I had, and I said, I don't know where the money's going to come from. But I'd pray about getting another job, and the Lord just said to me, "Nope, like you don't need to get another job." And I'm like, "Of course I don't need to get another job. Of course you would say that." Um, and so it got to the point where, because part of it was I was actually going to school at that time for my master's in clinical counseling because I wasn't sure if I wanted to pursue counseling or stick with coaching, and so I was waiting on some federal loans to drop into my bank account, but they weren't doing that because it just takes longer. That's
Right.
how government works sometimes,
Oh, yeah.
and or maybe not sometimes, but uh, anyways, so got to be the end of August, August 31st. It's my mom's birthday. And I call her. She asks me how I'm doing. I say I'm doing okay. Money's tight. I didn't say anything about not being able to pay rent for September. And we were just talking. And then my dad was there and he looks over at him and she says, "Can we tell him?" And I'm like, "Tell me what?" And she says, "Matthew, we want to give you, a certain amount of money." And I was like, and they told me how much it was, but out of respect for them, I don't want to say.
Sure.
And I was just like, whoa. Like literally on the last possible day, God came through and said, "Here's money for rent and then some." And I was so just, and the biggest thing that really struck me was what my dad said, because he's more of an analyzer. He likes to think things through a lot before making a decision because he really wants to make the best decision. And so when I first told him about coaching, he was like, "What the heck is that? Who's paying you for what?" Having his own concerns, especially as a young father. And so what he said to me was, "Matthew, I really believe in what you're doing, and your mother and I really want you to succeed, and that's why we're giving you this money because we believe in you, basically." And I was just like, I shed a tear, and I was just like, "Wow, like, okay, thank you, God." Like, crazy. And the thing in particular that I was struggling with was earlier I heard a homily at Mass at church about Lazarus and when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. And the priest talked about how, like, why did he allow Lazarus to die? Why did he weep over Lazarus if he was going to turn around and resurrect him? And what the priest was saying was he did that so that God's glory may be known. And that was middle of August. And so, and I was asking, like, "Lord, why are you letting this happen to us? I'm doing my best to do what you asked me to do. I went out on a limb, and so that God's glory may be known." So that was comforting. But then when that happened, my faith took on, like, I was already a faithful person, obviously, but like my faith took on a whole new depth. And frankly, I wouldn't trade that month for anything, because if I didn't suffer in that way, if I didn't have no way out in that way, then I wouldn't be able to experience God's goodness and have a deeper faith in that context. To where now there's not really a doubt in my mind that God's going to make it happen, you know? And not just on an intellectual level, but like on an emotional level. Like I actually believe it in a real way, that you don't get if you don't have suffering, that you don't get if you're not put through the fire. Because if that doesn't happen, you have no need to have deeper faith. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
100%. 100%. I mean, that's quite a story. People don't really get that either. I think very often people, they think that, God, Jesus, that it's an easy button and
Hmm.
that they just can go, okay, well, you know what? I'm just going to not do anything because I don't feel like
Hmm.
doing anything. I'm just going to sit here and pray.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah. And it just doesn't quite work. So the story, however, is interesting, and you talk about, your dad and, kind of like
Hmm.
where this idea, where the money came from. And he didn't understand what you were doing, but yet he still supported it.
Hmm.
Right. And he brings it forward for you. Um, the the money that you got, so to speak, was it
Hmm.
just to like they knew you were struggling and they wanted to just help you out, or were they thinking, hey, we're going to help you build this movement? How involved were they in what the movement was, or was it just about
Yeah.
helping you? I'm just curious.
I think it was more personal. Because I mean, I wasn't necessarily shy to say we were struggling. Um, I didn't want to, what I did not want to do is say, Mom and Dad, please, I need money, right? Because
Right.
maybe that's an okay thing to do, but just personally, like, I just don't want to do that. Um, and so I was okay sharing that we were struggling, but try to make it come across like it's tight, but we're making it.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it was a combination of they wanted to help us out personally to get by, but I think it was also because they knew that if we didn't make it, then this whole vision that I had would go by the wayside. So I think it was a combination of my them coming to realize what I was trying to do, how I was trying to really impact the culture, how I was trying to change the church and change the world. Um, and I have visions beyond just coaching, but I think that's kind of where I'm starting. So I think it was a little bit of both, but I think it was more just they really wanted to help us out, and make sure that it didn't die out before it got started.
I love that. Before we get
Yeah.
into the actual coaching, let's talk about what you just brought up. Your vision for this program, for where you're heading with it. You
Yeah.
mentioned changing the church, changing the world, helping people. In what ways?
Yeah. So, just in light of a lot of recent events, political violence, even just AI, like all of these things where we're becoming less and less human,
Mhm.
and we're becoming more detached from our own humanity. Um, if you think about the incarnation, right? Jesus himself, God, found it worthwhile to be human. Um, in contrast, we're doing a lot of things that are anti-human, right? We don't see the dignity in each person around us. Abortion is a huge issue. Like all of these things, um, where we're becoming more and more, our humanity is becoming more and more mutilated. And a huge part of that is because we've lost what it means to be human and what it means to be human well. And so I think that the church has actually done, a disservice because we're meant to be the light on the hill. We're meant to be the moral exemplar, and we're meant to show everyone this is what it means to live a flourishing human life. Partially because we recognize that it's not just about this life. And so what I find is that a lot of Christians, a lot of Catholics, just a lot of people in the church, a lot of the people who have a good theology don't have a good humanity. They don't, like they'll tell you about the gospel and then they'll get short with their wife. They'll tell you about the gospel and then they'll be struggling with pornography, masturbation. They'll tell you about the gospel and you know what I mean? All of these things. I don't necessarily blame them per se, but it's just this reality that we've lost the art of being human. We've lost the art of growing in virtue and understanding of what that is. So, what my vision is that Steadfast Life can be a place where there's coaching, there's education, there's courses, there's all these different things to help people to not only know more about the virtues, but then know how to personally grow in virtue. Because another thing too is that, particularly in the masculine Christian masculine culture, it's very much just stick it out, do what you got to do, cookie cutter kind of Catholic, right? Cookie cutter kind of Christian. And the problem with that is that a lot of people have different motivation structures, and some people are more self motivated, some people are more other motivated. And so what that means is that they're going to have a different champion virtue, if you will. So the four cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. Some people are very justice minded, right? Because that's largely about rendering to others what is their due. Um, and some people are more, fortitude minded. How do I stand up in the face of death or uncertainty? Some people are more prudent minded. How can I see reality as it is? How can I come to know the truth? Some people are more temperance minded. How can I be a balanced person? Right. So, if we just try to tell everyone, be virtuous and do these behaviors, we lose what it actually is to be virtuous, which is a disposition of the heart towards the good. And that's not a behavior. It's shown in the behavior, but it's not a behavior. And it's a similar thought process as faith without works is dead, but it doesn't mean that you have faith if you do works, right? Um, we're not justified by good behavior. We're justified by faith. And so that faith is dead if there's nothing to show for it, but it doesn't mean that it's only behavior.
Nice. All right. I appreciate the explanation. I love where you're going with it. I really do. The Steadfast Life, the coaching
Mhm.
program. Now, you do that with a partner?
Yeah. So me, this is myself, and then my colleague Louisa. She joined back in May. She was a friend of my wife. We got to chatting. She was in the counseling field, discerned with religious life, and then when she left, she wasn't sure she wanted to go back to counseling, and so we were chatting, and she was like, "What's coaching?" And a couple coffees later, she's like, "I think I want to do this." Um, so yeah, she's awesome. Really enjoy her. She works mostly with women, and really to help them to know their own genius and their own creativity. She really prioritizes being over doing, which I think I do as well, but probably a little bit less than that. I don't know if that's because I'm a man or why exactly, but yeah, she's a great asset. She's awesome.
Nice, nice. I'm glad you have help with it. That's cool.
Hmm.
The program itself. Let's talk about that for a minute, just because we are talking about this. There are some people here who may be interested in some
Hmm.
Catholic life coaching from either one of you,
Yeah.
because between the two of you, you do work with men and women both.
Hmm.
Yes,
Hmm.
right. So if folks are wondering, let's cover that real quick. What is the coaching program? I mean, not how much it costs or anything like that,
Yeah.
but describe for folks what they might be in for. You know what I mean? You talking? Is it a couple months? Is it a year? Is it like group? Is it individual? Give me a little bit of breakdown so people can go, that sounds interesting, and contact you.
Yeah. Yeah. So we mostly do individual coaching. I also have an engagement mentorship. So couples who are engaged to be married. Um,
Wow.
I find that the church really lacks in formation, marriage formation. I mean, just look at the divorce rates. Look at the lack of marriage rates. Like people don't see marriage as being valuable if they're outside the church, and then people in the church frankly don't really know how to be married well. And so I just break it down. It's with the marriage relationship, how to do that well, how to be an individual who is married well, how to still prioritize your own well-being, but then also parenting. Because we have this weird notion nowadays that just because you get married doesn't mean that you're called to parent. Now, I'm not saying that everyone is biologically able to have kids, right? Maybe adoption, or maybe you have spiritual children, so to speak. But parenting and marriage are interwoven, and you can't really separate them. And so, helping people to see that and grow in that. And then I also do marriage coaching, but also family coaching. So I help the family dynamic. I have a couple clients right now, and one of them said when they started, they're at their wits' end. They love each other, but they just get on each other's nerves and don't know how to handle it. Um, so different stuff like that. But really, what coaching is for Louisa and I, first of all, we try to get to know you and get it to be where um, it's actually relevant to you. It's not trying to be a cookie cutter program. We neither neither one of us actually like that word, um, and I think it's just because it's the context in which it's used is like just do our program and you'll be lust free, or just do our program and you'll be conflict free. And it's like,
Right.
that's not really how that works. But uh, each coaching session, we start out with saying, hey, is there anything in particular you want to work on today? What is it that you want to work on? And if you don't know, we have a form that you already filled out to kind of help you with that, maybe some coaching goals. But really, it's about trying to find what is the thing that really drives you? And then how can we use that to champion the other struggles so that way they're kind of all in one lens. So, for example, if you really value putting other people's needs first, but you also struggle with doing, exercising, okay, how can we reframe exercising as being you helping other people and being part of that, right? So, the other big thing too is that when I help guys who are struggling with lust, pornography, masturbation, most people will say it's a temperance issue, right? I gotta wrangle in my desires. But what I've found is that with most guys, it's actually a prudence issue. They don't know how to handle their thoughts very well. So a tempting thought will come in, and instead of ignoring it or knowing how to handle it, they try to fight with it. And the problem is that when we engage in a direct one on one conflict with the devil, we lose every single time. And so, what I found is actually this a sub virtue of prudence is alertness, being fully aware of the situation. So, what the devil tries to do, he tries to get us to have tunnel vision, where we can't see anything but A or B, right? Fight or flight. And so, if we try to run away, that's based on fear. And if it's based on fear, he's going to wrangle us in at the end. And if it's fight, well, now he's just going to tire us out until we either fall that time or next time. So what I found is that actually, if you can just be more alert to the full situation and be aware of something else about the tempting thought. So for example, you think of a woman in a red dress. You can either think about the woman or the red dress. Very different trains of thoughts. So what I do is I help them to, so to speak, focus on the red dress and distract from the distraction. And this actually works with anxiety and, um, intrusive thoughts and all that kind of stuff. Um, but I mean, that kind of goes back to the whole culture thing is we don't know how to think very well. And so the devil is very easy to disarm us in the tempting thoughts and the spiritual warfare because we don't realize that really he's a 3-year-old girl trying to throw fists when we try to pretend like he's this massively jacked dude that we have to really, fight against. But in reality, he's not a threat when we're with Jesus. And so the more that we understand that, the more we can actually engage in warfare that's less warfare and more just focusing on Jesus.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Little girl throwing fists. Um, I think I couldn't agree with you more, and I love that you brought up the spiritual warfare aspect of this
hmm
because for coaching, you end up encountering that twofold.
hmm
The first, of course, is that spiritual warfare is what is hitting any believer,
hmm
out there, um, and causing them their personal strife that they need to
hmm
get the coaching for. And so that has to be addressed if you're going to start healing them.
hmm
But then there's another sort of side to the spiritual warfare that I imagine has probably hit you in trying to
hmm
stop you from helping them to get better.
hmm
How has that impacted you, and what have you encountered with that?
Yeah. I mean, doubt's always a problem or a struggle or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And part of it too is because I recognize my own struggles. Being a life coach, it's like I need to be a perfect human in order to help people. That's the lie the devil tries to get me to believe. But
Hmm.
um, but one of the ways that I combat it is honestly, and maybe this isn't necessarily kosher per se, um, but I actually I share. I don't dump by any means with my clients, but if they ask me how I'm doing, I'll kind of share the surface level of my heart, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, hey, how you been, Matt? Doing pretty good. I've been really busy. We just got sick. You know, finances are tight, whatever. But we're doing well. God's good. How are you doing? Right? Um, and I think that because again, it's like the more that I can enter into the coaching process, the creative process with my clients as a real human,
Yeah.
I think that's super beneficial for other people, but it's also beneficial for me because Yeah, I can get rid of like the performance mentality or the imposter syndrome by just saying, "Hey, yeah, I struggle too, and this is a little bit of how I struggle." I'm not gonna dig into it because that's not what this conversation's about. Um, but yeah, just kind of being more human in the process, and then also outside of that, it's a struggle sometimes, but really making sure that I'm transparent with my wife and some good friends. Not in the sense of just, I'm struggling, woe is me, and really diving into that, but rather just making sure that I'm not, to some extent, impersonating somebody else while I'm not coaching. Because when you're with friends or when you're with your spouse or whatever, particularly when you're experiencing doubt, it can be easy to think that in order to be confident, I can't express any doubt. But in reality, like what I learned from that last August is that no, you actually experience confidence when you enter into the doubt and you turn to Jesus in the doubt. Because if you don't do that, you're pretending. And if you're pretending, that's when the devil's going to get you, because you're not actually grounded in reality.
Nice. Nice. I certainly would never ask you to, name any names or betray any confidences, but I'm
Sure.
curious in terms of what you're seeing
Yeah.
as more of a, is there a sort of more often than not, we see this, issue with folks who
Hmm.
are struggling.
Yeah.
What seem to be some of the biggest struggles that men and women are dealing with in your area?
Yeah. It's funny enough, people don't do leisure very much. Like, so, and what's crazy that
Right.
leisure is actually a virtue. Um, so temperance is uh so actually really quick. So the reason that there are four cardinal virtues is because way back when Aristotle was thinking about life, he said, now I'm paraphrasing obviously, but he said, okay, what are the different parts of the human experience? And he came up with your thoughts, your desires, your fears, and your actions slash interactions. Okay, how do I think well? Prudence. How do I desire well? Temperance. How do I manage my fears well? Fortitude. How do I act and interact well? Justice. And so what I find is that people have a sense of temperance as being, no, I need to pull back the reins. I need to be disciplined, which there's a part to it that's, true. But really it's about how do I desire well? How do I desire in an ordered way that I'm not sucked into one thing too much? So, a sub virtue of temperance is called eutropelia. It's a Greek word, and it means good leisure, basically. Doing something that you enjoy for its own sake. And a lot of my clients, when I say, "Hey, how often do you do things that you enjoy just because you enjoy it?" 9 times out of 10, they're like, "Uh, geez, Matt, I don't know. Uh, never." And I ask them, "Okay, the kind of person that doesn't ever enjoy things, that's the kind of person who believes that they never have time because they have to make ends meet. That's the kind of person who believes that their worth is in their work. That's the kind of person who believes that, I'm not good enough or I don't deserve things to enjoy, so I shouldn't do that, right? And so there's so many false beliefs that we actually promote when we don't engage in leisure. So that's a huge thing. The other thing too is that people uh, don't know how to think in an ordered way. And what I mean by that is a tempting thought will come, an intrusive thought will come, an anxious thought will come, and they engage with it instead of asking themselves the question, is this worth my time and energy? Right? Because the intrusive thought comes, and this happens a lot with young parents, right? Intrusive thoughts about harming their kid, doing something crazy, and then they have this belief of like, oh no, like, is that actually me? Is that actually my thought? Like, am I just a monster? Am I XYZ? And instead of saying, wait a minute, is this actually worth my time and energy to think about it, to consider it, to fight with it? And so, like, one of my clients, she had panic attacks, like one or two a day. 3 months later, zero panic attacks.
Wow.
All because we just normalized the intrusive thoughts. It was literally just don't make it a big deal because it's not a big deal. So some of the action steps were, all right, so you have an intrusive thought about, I don't even remember what they were, but something crazy like um, uh, killing. I don't know. I don't know if it's ever that, but like, let's just say killing their mom or killing their dad or whatever, something crazy. And they're just like, I don't want to do that. That's crazy. And I would say, okay, what's another thing you could do? You could light your pants on fire. You could also jump out the window. You could build a house of cards. There's so many options. And she was like, huh, I've never thought about it like that. Just treating it like another option, because technically it is an option, but then saying, yeah, that's just not something that I want to do. So normalizing it where it doesn't have so much power and weight, but then also in those moments of like high intense emotions, kind of playing jujitsu with the thought and using its own momentum against itself. So, for example, intrusive thought comes, yeah, I could do that. Oh, I could do that. I could do that. I could do that. And just allowing your thoughts to keep the momentum going. So yeah, I would say the two biggest things, and there's plenty more I could say about, but people don't engage in enough leisure where they actually are living an enjoyable human life where they're not totally based around work and their well-being and their worth coming from that. But then also people not thinking well and taking thoughts too seriously or not thinking creatively. I think that's another big thing too.
Wow. Not where I thought you were going to go, but I appreciate the.
Where did you think I was going to go?
Oh, it's hard to say, but the leisure part, I mean, there's so much that carries over to that because we're all working, too hard, which is why we don't have the leisure time. And even if we do, there's this thing about feeling guilty because you're meant to toil and you're meant to produce,
Mm-hmm.
and everything else. So there's all sorts of offshoots to
Mm-hmm.
that. But the fact of the matter is, what you just broke it down to very simply, we don't do leisure very well.
Yeah.
We just don't.
Yeah.
So especially, Gen Xers, like me, it's like we were raised where if you took leisure time, it was a sign of being lazy.
Right.
You were like, should be ashamed of taking that leisure time
Mm-hmm.
because you're supposed to be working 60 to 70 hours a week,
Mm-hmm.
in order to be, a good productive human being. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
how we were
Right.
all raised, right?
Yeah. And if you think about it, like the culture war, um, I've I'm not going to forgive myself. I forget the author's name, but there's a book called Leisure, the Basis of Culture. And the whole idea is that a culture is thriving when people engage in leisure. Um, and part of that too is that worship is actually a form of leisure. And the reason for that is because um, true worship is not based on its utility or its outcome. True worship is I'm doing it because I want to do it and for no other reason. I love my Father, I love God, I love Jesus, and I want to worship him because that's what I want to do. That's how I spend my free time. And so when you take away leisure, right? And so if you think about the cultural, the domino effect, what happened, um, first of all, they broke up the family with the Industrial Revolution and World War One and Two, right? So the breakdown of the family starts there, where women start to get into the workforce. And I'm not saying there's anything intrinsically evil with women working. Obviously, they were working plenty before that, um, but women go out of the home. Um, Kids start going into the school system. Dad leaves home for work or for war, and then what happens? Oh, the family doesn't ever spend time together.
Right.
Why? They're all working. And when you spend time together in leisure, um, you develop culture because everyone's there because they want to be. And so when you have a country, and not even a country, but just the West in general, that doesn't value leisure, what then happens is people don't value worship anymore because worship is a form of leisure. So why would I spend my time worshiping when I could be working and making money? Why would I be spending my time worshiping when I could be on my phone? Right? So leisure now is just pleasure. And that's a huge problem because when you ask people, what do you do for in your free time? Oh, I'll watch a movie. Oh, I'll scroll on my phone. Oh, I'll XYZ. That's just a base pleasure and not something that's restorative, right? Because what leisure is for, leisure is meant to remind us of our own humanity and bring us back to reality in the sense of, right, life is meant to be enjoyed, life is meant to be lived well. And so when we don't have that cultural appreciation, we lose the appreciation of church and worship. We lose the appreciation of, you know, going to cultural things like dances or festivals, or we don't even have that kind of stuff anymore. Like how many times have you been invited to go to, a big wide thing like that? right? You have to look for it. It's not culture anymore. And so now we have a culture of base pleasure and working till you can't work anymore, right? Those are the extremes. And that's just not what the Lord wants for us. That's not what life is meant for. And so that's also a huge thing that I do is try to remind people of what it actually is to be human. And as Christians, we're called to be that to the best of our ability, right? And so that's another thing too, is people have you might even say an idol of evangelization, right? Where it's like, no, I need to evangelize. I can't do anything else, right? I need to evangelize. That means that I have to be all inclusive and I can't stand for anything. I have to evangelize, right? And so the devil is very cunning in his plan because he breaks it down on so many different levels, right? He gets the culture to not prioritize leisure anymore. So why bother worshiping? Because there's other things to do. And then he also gets the Christians to think that we can't stand for anything. Don't get political, because if you get political, well, then that's not evangelization. But
Right.
that's not I mean, think about 1861 when the Civil War started. Abraham Lincoln, right? Is it okay to be political then when slavery is on the line? Like, at what point is it okay to be political? At what point is it okay to stand for your beliefs? Um, so he gets a bunch of spineless Christians. He gets Christians who don't prioritize leisure, which means that we view worship as work. And if you view worship as work, why would the kids do that? Because now it's just a set of rules, right? So it's this insidious plot. And so really what it is we need to go back to leisure. We need to get back to culture. We need to get back to standing up for the truth. How do you do that? You grow in virtue.
Nice. Nice. Now, in your coaching program, do you, it sounds like you mentioned action plans or actionable
Hmm.
steps. And I don't want you to give away the secret sauce. I mean, if
Ah,
people want
sure.
to find out more, hey, they got to contact you and find out about the
Yeah.
program. But it sounds like you do provide some sort of, actionable plan or action
Hmm.
steps to take. Um, are there maybe one or two steps you could share? That
Absolutely.
that doesn't give it away, type of
Absolutely.
thing, just for folks who want to maybe start moving back to that we've been talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. And honestly, I can't give it away. And the reason for that is because every action step is between me and the client, right? So after the conversation,
Perfect.
it'll
Yeah.
be, hey, what do you think would be a good action step? Right. If they can't think of anything, I usually can figure something out. I have plenty of opinions. Um, and we'll figure something out because really, again, that's the whole point. Your faith is dead if you don't do anything about it. But you need to make sure that you actually have faith and it's not just behaviorism, right? So what are some common action steps that we work on? A common action step, go back to leisure. Do something that you enjoy just for its own sake every day for 5 to 15 minutes, right? And the question you can ask yourself, and I got this from Dr. Rabella, so I can't coin the question. It's a good one. He said, if you could press a button and get the same outcome, would you press the button? And if you answer yes, it's not real leisure because it means that you're outcome oriented, not experience and the thing itself oriented.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? So,
Yeah.
if people will say, "Oh, my leisure is working out," okay. If you could press a button and get the effect of working out, would you press the button? And if you say yes, well, that's not really leisure because you're not doing it for its own sake. So,
Hmm.
doing something you enjoy for its own sake every day. It could be reading a book. It could be, um, I don't know, saying hi to somebody. It could be going for a walk. It could be going for a run. It could be making something. It could be Legos, just something that you enjoy for its own sake. And what I find is that it actually makes me a better worker because I'm not just there for work. I'm not just putting my worth in my outcome. So that's a great action step for a lot of people. The other one too, for people who struggle with anxiety, for scrupulosity, for intrusive thoughts, all that kind of stuff, is or overanalyzing, asking yourself the question: Is this worth my time and energy? If not, what is? Because when a thought comes up and you start wrestling with it, we forget to ask, wait a minute, do I even want to be wrestling with this? And so if you ask that question, that can help you kind of take a step back and actually choose how to orient yourself. Those are two really common action steps. And then if you struggle with pornography, masturbation, that kind of thing, I would say distract from the distraction. The thought comes, keep the momentum, keep your thought train, keep that momentum going. Okay. Because as soon as you stop moving, that's when the devil's going to get you. And a really cool word that I got in prayer many years ago was when, Jesus said, and not audibly, obviously, but he said, "Don't dwell on your sins as much as you dwell in my presence." And I think that's just so true for so many people. We beat ourselves up, but then also we think about in the moment the tempting thought. We dwell on that when we should be dwelling with Jesus. And so just asking yourself the question, is this actually worth my time and energy? If not, what is? And then just distracting from the distraction and engaging in real leisure every day.
Love it. Absolutely love it. All right. Matthew, how can everybody reach you, find out more about everything you're doing, contact you? Give us all your info, bro.
Sure. So steadfastlife.net is the website. So you can go there. Luis and I are there. Right when you get there, there'll be a button for a free call. All of our first calls are free because two reasons. One, you might just need one conversation. And if you just need one conversation, I don't want to charge you for that because, well, that's what I would do if I wasn't, a coach or whatever. Um, and then after that, we can figure out a good game plan. Usually I meet with my clients twice a month, sometimes more than that, but usually twice a month is kind of the minimum. Um, Figure out from there what it would look like. And then you can find my email on the website too, at the bottom of it. Find me on LinkedIn. Not super active on Instagram yet. I hate social media, if I'm going to be honest with you. It's a means to an end. So I'll be on Instagram at some point, but not right now. So
Nice. Nice. I love it. All right. Excellent. All right. As we kind of round this out, Matthew, I appreciate everything you brought today. And we've talked about some really awesome topics. Leisure is not where I thought we would go. So I'm a little, you probably tell, I'm a little taken aback. I'm like, man, I never
sure.
thought about that. That's a great, different viewpoint to it. I'm
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, wow. All right. Got to think about it differently. But, as we kind of wrap things up here, and I do appreciate everything you brought to the show today. Let me just ask you this in terms of, everybody who's out there, everybody's listening right now. Do you have any, maybe, parting thought, parting advice, maybe a little word of encouragement? We have
Hmm.
a lot of people who right now are suffering, who are having a
Yeah.
hard time, who are fighting these battles. They're fighting this spiritual warfare.
Hmm.
Any parting thoughts for the folks listening to this show to, maybe make them feel better tomorrow, stand up a little bit, maybe
Yeah.
get closer to becoming lions of God?
Yeah. I would say choose your battles well.
Mm,
The devil wants us to fight battles that aren't worthwhile. Again, he tries to get us to get sidetracked by tempting thoughts and whatever. That's not the battle, right? As soon as we start focusing on that, we lose all of our momentum. We lose all of our roar, as lions. Um, we just lose we lose the only energy and time that we have on useless things that don't matter. So I would say pick your battles well, right? Like stand for truth. Be charitable with your family and the people around you, and choose to fight the battles that actually matter, and don't let the devil sidetrack you on things that don't matter. I think that's a huge thing. And also too, like don't compare yourself because, like I was saying earlier, we all have different motivation structures. Some people are very self-motivated. Frankly, I am not one of them. I if I don't want to do it, it's really hard to get me to do it. I'm not gonna lie. My wife struggles with that all the time. But personally, I need something that's very meaningful and a cause. If I have a cause, I can do most things. But if I don't have a cause, I'm not going to do very much. So for some people, find your cause. For some people, find a good accountability system if that works for you. For some people, dig deep in research. And for some people, make sure that you're choosing the right things. And don't get too sidetracked and having to think everything through. So, yeah,
nice. Wonderful. Great way to wrap us up. Wow. Husband and father of two, Catholic life coach and founder of Steadfast Life LLC, Matthew Jandernoa. Matthew, thank you so much, brother, for coming on, bringing everything you did, and for helping people look at things a little bit differently. I appreciate you, and I really appreciate you coming on today.
absolutely. Thanks, Rory.
Thank you. Folks, boy, I'll tell you what, it is time. It's time to wake up the lions. And more than that, it's time for you to take your rightful place with your brothers and your sisters and let them hear you roar. Folks, the world is ready. You're ready. You just have to believe it.